thanks to Barb, Anne, and all of you for the opportunity to speak today. And you know, we did have some really fabulous presentations. We heard some great discussions, and quite clearly, I won't do any technical justice to any of them if I try to summarize them and talk about them in the context of Geoff Zeiss. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, I'm really here to focus on this guy and to talk about what we think about him, how he has played a role, and what he has done for the community. Now, he really was a friend to me. When I was head of the Canadian Mapping and Earth Observation Agency, I'd often need some reality checks. I'd need vision prompting. I'd have to, you know, I'd need a boost to my flagging spirits, or quite honestly, I just needed to get out of the office for a scotch or two and some great conversation. So I'd call him up. And in some senses, when I think about it, Geoff really did help me steer the ship of state when it came to the Canadian Mapping Agency. And he did so with a calming presence, and he had an infectious laugh that I think many of you remember. And he really was a friend of the global community. You benefited from his spirit and his grace. We all benefited from his knowledge. Through his blog, Between the Poles, he shared knowledge and insights around the world. He shared data, hard facts, and evidence around the world on the importance of standards. In fact, so much so that he was a member of the board of directors for the Open Geospatial Consortium for many years. He participated in many technical sessions, provided expert and operational advice at the technical, tactical, and operational levels. At the board level, he listened and he heard. The one thing that I often thought about Geoff, or knew about Geoff, is that he followed the 2 ears, 1 mouth rule. He listened twice as often as he spoke. And when he spoke, it was thoughtful. His interventions were not just thoughtful, but constructive. They were positive, and they were always focused on the goal of resolving an impasse or overcoming a challenge. And in the same way, I'm told, he provided analysis and support and some real practical solutions to move forward initiatives around the world, such as the UK Underground Registry and the work of the UK Geospatial Commission, whether he sat in advisory roles or strategic roles in a variety of US state or national level initiatives. And, you know, working tirelessly, including up to a few days before his passing, on moving this conference forward, as well as on the network that we call the Canadian Underground Asset Register Working Group, and where we're trying to advance widespread national underground mapping in Canada. Geoff really loved to attend social events, you know, and one of the things that he did for us is he shared his time, which was invaluable. And one of the things that he did when he shared his time is he made connection. And so for many of us who were connected to him, we've often thought about how we keep Geoff's vision alive, how we honor his legacy of knowledge, how we build on it and promote it, and how we engage and attract future generations into a set of jobs that are in real need of new skills, basically that are starving for labor market supply, and people that are full of desire and optimism to provide tools to face some of our most critical challenges on the planet. So I've got some ideas around how we can also keep Geoff's vision, determination, and work on knowledge alive. First and foremost, we adopt the Geoffism. And one of the things he always said when we talked about digital twins together, we always said, you know, or he always said, we need to know what's below. The other thing that he often said is it was so important for initiatives like BIM or digital twins or vertical investments and things like infrastructure to not just look at the tip of the iceberg and know that everything happens above, or think that everything happens above, that what happens above ground is inextricably linked to below ground. And together they form a complex ecosystem that's going to be buffeted by climate, human population change, as well as many, many other events. Second, some of us want to continue the interdisciplinary approach to providing strong policy narratives. In particular, looking at something like continuing the superb blog that he has called Between the Poles. Now, on Between the Poles, you will sometimes find detailed analyses or reports. Here, I just quoted one where Geoff did a white paper that he did for the Geospatial Information and Technology Association by him and Dr. Sakura Shinowaki back in 2020, talking about the underground. Now, what Geoff did before his passing is he also put Between the Blogs in the hands of somebody that he had been mentoring, our friend John Murphy, who has been on the call and listening. And John is going to be working very actively to keep Between the Poles alive. What we also want to do is we want all of you to perhaps think about contributions you can make from a narrative, from an analysis, from a use case perspective. The other thing that Geoff did is provide strong policy narratives. You saw Alan talk about and quote the National Underground Asset Register from the UK, and I believe Thalia also had this image. And this was an approach that you could find in Geoff's work. And I had to laugh when I was reading, going back through Between the Blogs. And Geoff, he had this wonderful way of making this argument that was completely irrefutable, but it was dense from a policy perspective. So I'll just read it really quickly. It says the Common Ground Alliance collects statistics regarding damage to underground. And there are 390,000 cases and an average cost of 4,000 in direct costs per hits. It represents a 50 billion drag on the economy. According to PHMSA in 2005, the excavation damage was a cause of 1,052, on and on and on. So this kind of data exists in Between the Poles, and they would be wonderful for us to get onto that blog, to find these kinds of data and information, to update them, and let's try to share them again, and let's try to move forward, making the blog a real living example of evergreen argumentation for better underground mapping. Some of these policy stuff was reflected in some work that we're doing in Canada, and Geoff had a key role to play with work that's being done at Infrastructure Ontario and developing an indicative path forward. I'm happy to share this slide afterwards. And again, having a government department or having a government-led initiative to really articulate policy perspectives, I think is really going to be critical as government and policy are going to have to, government and the private sector are going to have to work together. The other thing that Geoff also wanted us to do is continue on and provide expertise and solutions in the way of standards. He was a big believer in interoperability, and Alan spoke earlier about the OGC Muddy standard and all of the work that went into that. I think that it would be incumbent on us to make sure that the work that Geoff had really influenced and helped talk about at the OGC continue. And I'd even say that Geoff was somebody that brought a whole lot of clarity to any of the discussions that we have. And I often found it kind of interesting that, we talk about needing clarity through standards, yet we call this standard a muddy standard. So I thought to myself, I think I'm going to dedicate my own efforts to working within the OGC and talking about rebranding the muddy standard to perhaps the Zeiss standard. As a way of remembering all of the efforts and the initiatives, and having us, use that Zeiss standard as a way in which we can touch back to the work and make sure that we keep linking together as a community and ensure that we come together. The other way that we used to come together is in Canada, we had these things called, we have this organization called Go Geomatics. Go Geomatics holds these socials fairly regularly throughout the country in various cities, often working with campuses and bringing students together. Geoff was a regular at these meetings. He would come out, he would provide his time, he would put presentations together, he would talk to the young people coming out of university. And it's really my perspective that it would be nice to take this model of organization and extend it around the world and continue and push this forward. And as we do that, I think it's going to be kind of exciting if we think about something else, because he really did believe in the future. He really did believe in youth, and he really did believe in rigorous approaches to putting underground mapping forward for governments, that he has taken it upon himself to actually organize with Carleton University an endowment fund. And so Carleton University here in Ottawa has established the Geoff Zeiss Urban Infrastructure Mapping Fund, which will build on decades of innovation that focus on effective and sustainable urban infrastructure. There'll be research, there'll be development. There's a range of possibilities that we're thinking about, from graduate scholarships to endowed chairs. I know there's a lot of PhDs out in the audience, and there's plenty of opportunities that we want to help create. We also want to help create and work on some partnerships with flagship programs in the federal government to establish research priorities, as well as the provincial government and other international agencies if possible. And, we do have a fabulous geomatics group at Carleton University that will be working on coordinating across disciplines, coordinating researchers, and working with other universities and organizations around the world. So with that, I would strongly suggest that here are what we would call our 6-point action plan to not just push forward our efforts in the area, but to remember Geoff. 1, have you guys submit articles, studies, commentaries, and perhaps even your presentations that you did today to put up on and share with Between the Poles. Let's work together and identify translating operational realities into real policy initiatives. So if the private sector has 1 or 2 potential clients that you are working with, how is it that we can grow those 1 or 2 operational deployments of the underground digital twin into a larger initiative? How does it become a bigger piece of either a national, regional, state, local, provincial initiative? The other thing is, how can we move from a muddy standard to a Zeiss underground standard? In Canada, we're going to continue the Underground Mapping Forum. It's going to continue and evolve, and I would like to say that we are currently seeking not-for-profit status as we look to establish a roadmap, studies, and work with the endowment fund people at Carleton University, as well as anybody else that's interested within our broader community in Canada and beyond. There will be an urban mapping forum, underground utility mapping forum in May of 2023. And we'll be doing a deep dive on underground mapping there. It's a subsurface utility mapping strategy forum. It'll be organized by Jonathan Murphy and Go Geomatics. And I understand WGIC, Barb Bryan, is going to be participating. I understand that a variety of individuals that are even here today in attendance will be interested in. At that particular point in time, we will also gather stakeholders to help set the strategic directions and the strategy around the Geoff Zeiss Endowment Fund. So until then, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Here is the link for anybody that wants to donate to the endowment fund. And here are a few names that we will send around at a later point in time. And with that, I thank you. And thanks for listening to me talk about my friend, my colleague, and fellow Scotch enthusiast who I will really miss. Thank you.